Hey everyone, welcome back to Grease Unfiltered. I'm Crystal, the sister who tries to stay organized but definitely does not.
And I'm Danette, the sister who thinks she's the calm one until life proves otherwise.
We're the duo behind Grow Through Your Grief, figuring out life, loss, and healing one emotional plot twist at a time.
If you're grieving, missing someone, or just trying not to spiral about absolutely everything, welcome. You're in the right place.
No perfection, no pretending, just honest sister chats, dark humor when necessary, and real talk about grief. Today is extra personal. I'm here with a very special guest, my little sister Danette, and we're going to talk about the last week of our dad's life, his time in hospice, the ups and downs, and the day that we had to say goodbye. This is the story of that week, raw and real, because so many of you are walking through something similar.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for letting me be here. This is such an emotional topic, but we both feel so excited to share our story with you. We hope to help someone else who is going through something similar right now or replaying their very own last week with their loved ones.
Let's start at the beginning of that week. So, to paint a picture, our dad went into hospice on June 8th. So, he was diagnosed with terminal lung cancer the August before. So, we knew that the end was going to be coming, but the last week was where we're going to focus on. So, I was at work, and our older brother, Jeremiah, was in town. He is in the Air Force, was in the Air Force, I should say. He's retired now. But at the time, he was in the Air Force, and he was here spending some time with our family. And he was actually about to head back home, but we got the call that our dad was not doing well. So, I remember I was at work, and my brother called me, and it was a Friday, and he said, he wasn't crying, but you could feel it in his voice. And he said, "We knew this was going to happen, but it doesn't make it any easier." And in that moment, my heart just completely dropped out of my chest because I thought that he was dead. I thought he was going to call me and tell me that our dad was gone. But what was happening was that my dad was beginning to transition and the end was coming. And so I called my boss and I left. And I called my mom because she was home watching my daughters. And I hurried home and I got in the car. My mom drove me to the hospice place because I was panicking and freaking out and didn't really know what I was going to walk into because I'd never gone through this experience really before. And it was just a really horrible day because you know it's coming once your loved one enters hospice, but like when it actually is coming, it's like a totally different ball game. So, Danette, let's talk about where you were on that day and kind of what you went through.
Yes, absolutely. My journey that day is a little bit different because I remember getting the phone call from you as soon as I got off the airplane in California. I was getting ready to attend my best friend's bachelorette party, and I know prior to even getting on the plane, we were contemplating like, do I go? Do I stay? What should I do? And ultimately, we were like, you should go. You should have fun. It's a quick weekend and you should get away, take some time from yourself. This has been a really hard journey up to this point. And I remember getting the call from you as soon as I touched down. I hadn't even picked up my bag yet. And you were like, I think you need to come home. This is it. I don't think dad's going to come out of this time. He's been in and out of the hospital. He's been in and out of responsiveness. He's not eating or drinking at this point. And this is really the next transition in his life. And you need to come home.
Yeah, and for me, it really just felt like the air left the room when I got the call because, as I mentioned earlier, even though we knew he was declining, just there's something just so final about it when you hear those words. We knew this was coming, and it was heartbreaking and terrifying. Danette, what were those first hours like for you? Tell the story about, did you come home from California or what did that look like for you?
I think we were in a little bit of denial, at least I was, because I was like, I had just gotten here. Do I stay? Do I leave? We weren't really sure, but at the end of the day, I ended up staying in California. I ended up going to spend the night with my friends and my best friend at her bachelorette party. I ended up staying stone cold sober because I was so scared. What if I do need to pack my bags and rush to the airport and get on the next flight out? What do I do? And so I ended up staying, and like my body physically was in California, but my heart and my mind was in Colorado with my dad and the rest of our family. And so I think when I woke up the next morning, it was like 5 a.m. California time, and I made the decision to book the next flight home and go back to Colorado and see dad and see the rest of the family and make sure that I was where I needed to be, and that felt right for me. Was there anything that you remember about walking into the hospice center or setting up dad's room, anything like that? Because I wasn't there for that part of things.
Yeah. So when I first walked in, our dad was just laying there. And so our dad liked to lay with his knees up. That's just what made him most comfortable in his final days. And so I remember walking in and just seeing him. He was covered up with just a bed sheet and he just looked like he was sleeping with his legs up. So it didn't really look like anything different because that's we're used to him sleeping a lot with just him being so ill and just being on all the medications and just in so much pain and the painkillers. They sleep a lot there towards the end. So it honestly didn't really feel that different looking at him. But what really brought that finality to it is when I walked in and I sat down and I held his hand and I started talking to him and trying to wake him up, and there was just no response. Because previously you could talk to him and he would move around and whatnot, but he was just passed out basically. He was unresponsive. There was no movement from his end. You could see he was breathing. He wasn't making any weird noises or any loud breathing or anything like that. It just felt like he was in a really deep sleep. But it really worried me when I tried to talk to him and see if I could get him to wake up. And that's when I called my sister to be like, okay, he's legitimately not responsive and you should probably come home. But I also remember shortly after the hospice nurse came in and she was trying to talk to him. She was talking to us and she was just doing her exam on him. And she started tickling his knees. And oh my gosh, this is where it gets really crazy because my dad literally went, oh, and he like panicked. It was almost like he was having a nightmare or something and someone startled him and he made this loud noise and jumped. And what's going on? And then it was like he woke up and I was like, okay, now I feel really bad because I've called my sister who's in California trying to enjoy a bachelorette party, trying to get away. And I'm like, okay, maybe he's not really dying. When you go through that denial of maybe they were wrong, maybe he still has some more time. But after talking to the hospice nurse, she's, hey, the signs are here and he's going to have moments where he's in and out and he's going to be transitioning. And this is normal for him to go unresponsive for a little bit of time and then to come to. And then the unresponsive times are just going to get longer and longer until he doesn't respond anymore. And so that's what I really remember that at the first like 20 to 30 minutes of walking in there. And it was like an emotional roller coaster. But I know I felt comfortable that he was in hospice just because I felt like he had a little more comfort care. But what about you? Do you feel that it gave you some comfort that he was there in hospice, or did it feel more like panic to you?
I think for me personally, it felt more comforting. And gosh, shout out to the hospice staff and the nurses and the team at dad's facility near the end of his life because I think they were all pretty outstanding and amazing. Really took care of him, even though he was literally dying, like right on his deathbed. And they were still coming in and out, trying to give him his medicine, trying to take care of him, trying to make sure he was eating, although he wasn't. They were really doing everything that they would for anyone else, even though he's laying there, he's non-responsive, he's not eating or drinking at this point, and we're nearing end of life care ultimately. And for me, it was really peaceful and comforting. And I did also find a lot of comfort with everyone coming in and out of his room. We were really surrounded and really fortunate to be surrounded by a lot of people and friends and family that loved and cared about our dad, just like we did. It was really comforting to me. Also, it was really great that we were in dad's hometown essentially. So it was really great to be so close to everybody. But those first couple of days almost felt quiet and scared just because we weren't really sure. We got dad settled into a really good routine. We were staying there. Like we were at this point, we were like, we can't leave. We don't want to leave dad alone. We don't want him to die alone in this hospital bed by himself. We want to be here. So we were taking shifts, right? Like it was either me, you, or Jeremiah that was there and ensuring that somebody was always there from family to be with him, to comfort him and make sure that he never felt alone throughout this either.
Yeah, and I remember you and I would try to take shifts together because I don't think either of us wanted to be alone when the time came, if the time came. So definitely was lots of routines. I think the three of us did a really great job of making sure that somebody was there at all times. And we really props to our bosses and our coworkers and our families at the time who were able to allow us to be there as much as we could. I'm so grateful for those people as well. And I think it was just such a strange mix of kind of peace, but then also like constantly waiting of what's next? When's he going to stop breathing? What's this going to look like? And I don't know, it was definitely really peaceful and comforting, but also really nerve wracking at the same time. I don't know. It was just a very emotional time. And it's such an emotional week with highs and lows all week. Despite him being on his deathbed, there were some really beautiful moments that we had that we will talk about here shortly.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Crystal, what stands out from those early days? Was there, I know you mentioned the way that Dad looked earlier, but anything more specific about that or the things that he had said leading up to his final moments?
Yeah, so honestly, so our dad was a really strong man. He was a mechanic, he was a fisherman, he was always outdoors. So he was super strong when he was first diagnosed. And one thing that I think was just so awful about cancer in general and terminal illness is the way it really breaks down the body and just makes people so weak and frail from a body perspective and just tired. He looked so tired, and it was so hard to see him like that because he was such an active person before. I remember when we lived at home, we had a lake. We were fortunate enough to have a lake on our property on the farm that we grew up on, and our dad was always out camping and fishing and walking around the lake every night after dinner. And so it was really hard, I think, to see him just laying in bed and just looking. He had no muscle mass. He looked tired, and just I think that's what stands out for me the most is just knowing that he was so frail and so weak. But also, when you looked into his eyes, though, you could see down into his soul and you could see that like your dad was still there. So that was something that I will never forget, is just being able to still look into his eyes and still see the light that was there when he would talk to us as in his kids and his family and friends. Like he still was there. He was still our dad despite the medication and things like that, making him exhausted and changing him a little bit, just because when he's on such high doses of painkillers, it does change your person a little bit. And when he's in that constant pain, but he was still funny. He was still cracking jokes. He was still being a total goofball and just being himself and trying to push through it because he knew the end was coming. And I think he was really trying to make the most of whatever time that he was conscious and able to have conversations with us. He was really funny. He made jokes constantly. We had a lot of fun and a lot of laughter that last week while he was awake. And what about you? Do you remember any funny or sweet moments from that week?
I don't particularly I recall if this was that week or the week prior, but I remember Dad laying in bed and we were all there. It was like me, you, Jeremiah. I think Dad's dad was there, so our grandparents were there, and maybe his brothers. And Dad was laying there, and he was like pretending to fish. Do you remember that?
Yeah, I totally do.
And I don't know why that sticks out in my head so much because I try to think of all of the good things that happened when we were in that room because there was a lot of bad things that we don't want to talk about or remember just because we want to remember Dad in a way that feels good and makes us feel good. And I remember him just like going around and he was like casting his fishing rod out to each and every one of us in the room. And it was the funniest thing. And that memory sticks out a ton to me. And like also another thing that really sticks out to me is like chocolate ice cream. And we honor Dad all the time by eating chocolate ice cream, probably more than we should consume, but any excuse to eat chocolate ice cream, we're like, oh yeah, but this is what Dad would do. Dad would eat chocolate ice cream tonight, even though he just ate dinner. Or maybe Dad is just eating chocolate ice cream for dinner tonight. However we can honor Dad, we do. So I love being able to share those stories. So Crystal, how did you learn to cope when like nothing seemed to happen?
I think that was the hardest part, was because you know it's coming, especially that Friday when we first got the phone call. I remember the hospice nurse telling us it could be hours up to 1 week, but we do not believe that he will be here longer than a week. And so you know that the time is ticking, but also it's like the longest week of your life, but also the shortest week of your life because it's so long because you're just waiting for the inevitable to happen. And you want it to happen because you're so sad with seeing them the way that they are laid up in bed and he was in so much pain, like an insane amount of pain. And so for those reasons, you want it to happen quickly because you don't want to see them sitting there suffering anymore. And you know that the quality of life is completely gone. And so you're like ready for it, but then it's like nothing happens. And then it's like a total like mind fuck because, excuse my French, but it's like you're waiting, but then it's like he's sitting there casting fishing rods to everybody and laughing and giving us thumbs up and eating a little bit of ice cream, even though he hasn't eaten real food in a while. And so it totally just messes with your mind. And so I think what I would do was when I would cope, I think is really just try to make sure that I was eating and taking care of myself. It was so hard. I had no appetite. My stomach was hurting. I was nauseous, but just like really forcing myself to make sure that I was still eating at meal times and snacking and things like that and just trying to take a little break too. So I think the shifts were really good for us because it let you step away from the waiting and the what's happening, nothing's happening, and let you take a little break from it a little bit. So I don't know. I think that's really what I would say is just stepping away and just making sure that I'm still taking care of myself to the best of the ability that I had at that time.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll never forget sleeping on that floor with you. I know we were so scared to sleep there, and we had it wasn't even an air mattress. I don't even know what it was, but it was just this terrible mat that we slept in, and we were right next to Dad the whole time. So for me, it's like making sure that we're together, taking care of ourselves, but also I'll never forget sleeping on the floor, eating chocolate ice cream with Dad, and the room just being filled with so many family and friends and so much love and support. And really just everyone came together in such a beautiful way. Like it really brought us closer. It brought us closer to our uncles, our grandparents, obviously to each other. But it was just really such a beautiful and peaceful time. And I think Dad would have really been proud of the way that we all handled it.
Yeah, I agree. And also, one thing too, just to add about sleeping on the floor, yes, as you said, it was like so uncomfortable, but also our dad was on the morphine pump and the fentanyl pump to where he could push the button every 2 minutes to administer more through his IV. The nurses told us because he was in so much pain, but he was also not responsive, we were allowed to push the button every 2 minutes for him. And so one of us had to be awake at all times, like pushing the buttons. So we were sleeping in shifts. I don't think we really got much sleep, period, but it was a great bonding time, like you said. And then I do want to just add about the chocolate ice cream. Our dad has always loved ice cream. It's always been his favorite thing, especially chocolate, but he literally would eat so much. It was like those little cartons with the wooden spoon on them that you would get in elementary school. And it got to the point where they would bring him one with a meal, but then he would ask for some in between meals. And they went and bought him his own box of chocolate ice cream and put them in a special spot that we could access. So we didn't even have to ask for ice cream. And so he had an all you can eat chocolate ice cream buffet for the last probably 2 weeks of his life, I would say, because he stopped eating solid foods and all he could tolerate, his throat was so sore and all he could tolerate was swallowing the chocolate ice cream. We'll never look at it the same, like you mentioned earlier. I also do remember holding his hand during that week. I had a little bit of time to myself with him and he was unresponsive at this point, but I remember telling him that it was okay to let go and that I promise I will take care of his granddaughters because that is something that as soon as he got sick, he made sure that I knew that I was to take care of his grandchildren. Not sure why he would think I wouldn't, but he wanted to remind me. And I just remember telling him like I will take care of those girls and I will make them proud and I'll make you proud of me in the way that I am a parent. Although he couldn't respond, a tear fell down his cheek. And so I just want to say that if you are in this position right now and you are with a loved one or you're experiencing anticipatory grief and you know that your loved one is going to be in this position here in the near future, talk to them even if they can't hear, because I am a firm believer that they can hear everything you're saying, and just tell them all the things that you want to say. But I'll never forget too when things started to shift. Like when it got to the point where he stopped being responsive, it was like the last 3 days he just he wasn't responsive and we were just waiting. And I remember noticing his breathing change, and the nurses were really explaining the signs. Like he was modeling really bad on his knees and his feet and his ankles and things. And he had cold hands and feet, which are signs. And then just the agonal breathing, where the breathing gets really abnormal and it almost sounds like they're gasping for air. And then there's long pauses. And I think that was the really hard thing, is to hear him breathing like that. And they say that it doesn't hurt them or they don't even realize that they're doing it, but it sounds really awful to watch and to listen. And it just feels like they're so uncomfortable.
The physical changes that we saw in Dad were definitely really hard to watch and to witness. And the shallow breathing, the long pauses, so terrifying and heartbreaking. And like sounds we'll never forget. Like I feel like for the first year after Dad died, like I was like, it's like that hiccuping sound. Like that sound for me will forever be engraved in my mind. And also it was like so hard to hear those sounds like the first year after Dad died. So super hard and challenging to watch and to get through. Dad obviously, as you mentioned, was this bigger guy, and like here we are just watching him almost deteriorate, right? It's super, super hard. What was the hardest change for you to watch?
I think besides seeing the like physical changes in his body overall, that was like the hardest overall. But I think in that last week, I think the hardest thing was really just the breathing, because as I mentioned, it seems like they're really uncomfortable, even though the experts say that they're not. But oh man, that was hard for me. And I remember my brother would be like, is he gonna breathe again? Because there were really long pauses to the point where you're like, is he done? Is now the time? And then he comes back, and I think that was the hardest part. So heartbreaking and terrifying, like you mentioned. So, what do you think you did to take care of yourself during those moments that were really hard?
I think for me, comfort food. And that was probably like a greasy cheeseburger, but also just making sure that I'm remembering to meditate and to work out and to like physically take care of myself, and make sure that we had a little bit of a mental dump afterwards, because it's so heavy. And when you're in it, you think like nothing else is going to matter, right? Like we are coming up on the biggest milestone of our lives, and it's something that is going to change our lives forever. But really making sure that we were taking care of ourselves, making sure that we were eating and drinking and taking 5 minutes to just walk the hall and come back in the room or go sit outside. I remember at the facility that Dad was at, there was a really nice patio outside. So taking 5 minutes to just go outside, breathe in some fresh air, not being away for too long, but being away long enough where you could reset and recharge your battery as well. Did you ever feel guilty for stepping out or needing a break at all during this time?
I don't think I ever felt guilty, but I was in a position to where at the time I had an almost 1-year-old and an almost 3-year-old. My husband was taking the parenting duties solo that last week because I wasn't home much. I think you and I took a lot of the day shifts, and I think our brother took half the night shifts and things like that. And so I know we tried to rotate it as best as we could, but I was also still trying to be home and to spend some time with my daughters because they're important. And I didn't want to just, despite what's going on in my life, I didn't want to make them feel abandoned for the week. So I never felt guilty per se, but I did feel that it was important for me to be there. I wanted to be there. So I think if anything, I was more just anxious about getting the call when I wasn't around that he was going to pass. So I think that's the biggest thing for me, was just wanting to be there when it happened. But yeah, I don't think I felt guilty because I think, like you said, really need to make sure you're taking care of yourself too.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. So let's talk about the morning that Dad died, because I think that we are coming up on that 7-day timeline, if you will, that they gave us when they told us that Dad was going to be transitioning. And they gave us the 3 days or a week, and we're coming up on the week. And we wake up that morning, and as soon as we wake up on the floor of Dad's room, it felt different. And maybe it was just that the signs were getting more and more prevalent, and we knew that the time was coming and it wasn't going to be much longer.
Yeah, I agree. I feel like the air just felt really heavy and still. And I do think that it was just because at this point he's on day 3 of not being responsive. And that I think the hope was gone that things were going to like shift again and that he was going to wake up and be totally fine because the modeling was there, the breathing was there, the hands, the clamminess, like all that was there. His blood pressure was dropping and it was time. And I think we really knew that it was going to be the day, but I think it was one of those where we're like, maybe it's just going to keep dragging this out because it's been a really long week. But I was really hoping that day was going to be the day because it was just getting more and more devastating to watch him.
Yeah, absolutely. And what do you remember most about those final hours with Dad?
Oh man. So our dad ended up passing away at 9:40 in the morning. So my sister and our brother and I, we all were there together. We had all spent the night there together, which I thought was really cool. And I think it was when we knew it was really getting to the end, none of us wanted to leave. It was, hey, we're waiting this out because none of us want to miss this and we wanted to be there for each other, I think. But it was really cool. So that morning, probably about 9:15 or so, the nurses came in and they said, listen, your dad is waiting for something. And I know getting to talk to him when he first came into hospice, he didn't like being around people. He loved the support and he loves his family and friends, but he could only take so much of it. He liked to be solo. He liked to be out fishing. He liked to be out in the outdoors by himself. And so she said, listen, why don't you guys go stand out in the hallway? We're going to give him a little sponge bath and shave him and clean him up a little bit. And then you can come back. But I think he's holding on because I don't think he wants you guys to be here, truly. I think he wants you here, but not in the room. And so we said, okay, we'll respect that. However, our dad did ask that we don't ever leave him alone. So we only stepped out when they were changing him and things like that and bathing him. And so I think we all felt a little like sad or guilty about stepping out. But what was really cool is we were out in the hallway talking, and then our dad's friend, Dawn, came down the hall, and the nurses had come out. Dawn came in, so we let Dawn go in for a few minutes by himself. And Dawn went in and saw him, and then he just turned and waved to us and walked away. While I've never asked him, I am convinced that my dad was dead when went in there because he did not come down the hallway and speak to us, and that was not like him. But right when we were about to walk into the room, our grandparents walked down the hall. And I will tell you that I get chills just thinking about this because as soon as we went back into the room, our dad was gone. And it was my brother, my sister, myself, and our grandparents. My dad's 5 most favorite people on the planet and the most special people on the planet to him were all there together when it happened. Even if it had happened a few minutes before my grandparents came, I truly believe that he was waiting to be alone and that he knew that the kids needed each other and that our grandparents needed us and that we needed our grandparents. And so it was such a beautiful moment. And as sad as the moment was, it was also so freaking special and so incredible. And I will always be grateful that is how his last moments were, that he was alone like he wanted to be, but we were there to go in, and then we went in and sat with him and spent a little time with him, and then our uncles came down and we all got to just spend a little time together as a family. But what do you remember most about that final day?
I think you summed it up very nicely. For me too, just to add to that, because I never got the chance to really have a conversation with Dad before he died about saying goodbye or anything like that. Like you had that opportunity, which I think is so great, but I never really had that with Dad. And I remember before we left the room, I opened his blinds because I was like, oh, maybe he'll want a little bit of sunshine in here. And I just remember looking at him and telling him out loud, Dad, I am going to be okay. My husband is going to take care of me. We are going to be fine. We love you so much, but just know we are going to be okay. And I think that was really comforting too in that time because like I never had that conversation with Dad prior because like I didn't want to. And then I'm like realizing like, oh no, this is the last chance. There's not going to be another opportunity for me to tell him these things and for him to hear it. That is really what I remember most about that final day. But was there anything else that was really comforting to you in that last day or in those final moments that you want to talk about?
I just think being together was the most comforting thing. I think just having all of us there together was awesome. I will say though, that one thing that sticks out to me the most was our brother, who is a sergeant in the military. He is not a super emotional person, or if he is, he does not show it to us ever. I don't think I've ever seen my brother cry, But as soon as our dad died, our brother started crying and really let it out. And it was the first time I felt like he ever expressed himself emotionally to us and in front of us. And so I feel like that was really comforting to see him cry in a way, in a weird way, because it made it seem like it was okay for everybody to just let it out. Because I think we all tried to be so strong in front of our dad. And I think that is one of the regrets that I have, is that I didn't cry in front of my dad or tell him how upset I was about him having cancer and it being terminal. I wish I would have felt my emotions a little bit more with him, but I was trying to be strong for him and trying to not let him see how much it was affecting us because I didn't want him to worry. But I don't know, just after he passed, just time just felt so strange. Like people came in quietly, the nurses would come in to check his vitals, check on us, and I don't know, it was like the room stood still.
Yeah, I remember just sitting there not wanting to leave because it just felt so final. And honestly, that's like the last time we would ever be in that room and ever be physically in front of dad ever again. And just looking back, it seems so surreal that even happened. But how did you feel in those first few moments once we realized that dad was passed?
I think I felt just so calm and at peace. And I honestly didn't know that's how I would feel. I felt almost a huge like weight had been lifted off of us, and not because I wanted him to die, but I think there's a difference between quality of life and just being alive but not really living. And somebody that was so active in his time when he was healthy, going from that to being bedridden. He was bedridden and bedbound for probably the last like 2 months of his life. That was not our dad. That was not how he wanted to live. That was not how he wanted to go out. And so for me, I felt such great comfort that he was not physically suffering anymore and that he wasn't in pain and wasn't just being pumped full of pain medication just to get by and not even really get by because it didn't even really help. He was still in an excruciating amount of pain despite how much pain medication he had. So I don't know. I think just looking back, I think just so much about what that week has taught us.
Yeah, me too. I definitely think that it changed the way I think about death and even how I want to live.
What do you think you learned about love and family that week?
I think for me, like just everyone being so incredibly supportive of not only dad, but of us too. And just knowing that all of dad's friends and extended family, like those are our friends and our extended family. And everyone would come in and check on dad, but they would also check on us. And you never really realize, especially with dad, we don't need to get into his funeral now, but the love and the support that we had at dad's funeral, it was just truly incredible. And it changed my perspective on the way that I continue moving forward in my life and the way that I look at death, because dad's death was so peaceful and he was just surrounded by everyone that loved him and supported him for who he was. And dad was unapologetically Dean, right? That's just who he was. Either you loved him or you hated him. And a lot of people really loved him. And he didn't ever change to fit into some type of mold or be somebody that he wasn't. And that's the legacy that I wanted to continue on. So if someone is going through this or about to go through this, what would you want them to know?
I would want them to know that last week is going to be the hardest week of their life because it's going to be full with so many emotions. And I think if you look at anticipatory grief, because that's what I'm looking at this as somebody when you know they're going to pass away, I'm not talking about grief from a car accident or something that happens unexpectedly, but for somebody that truly has a terminal illness that is healthy and then they slowly start to deteriorate and then they go into hospice. So this is the people that I'm talking about, is just that week is going to be the hardest week to watch them go through this because you feel so insanely helpless. You feel like you are just sitting there waiting and watching them suffer, despite the best effort of the hospice nurses and the doctors to try to keep them as comfortable and as pain-free as possible. You know that they're still in some pain, and it's really tough to see. But also, I would want you to know too that while it is going to be the toughest week of your life or toughest moments of your life, it's going to also be such a great opportunity for you to say what you need to say, to get things off your chest, to really share those moments and memories and make those memories with each other. So with your family that's there visiting, friends that are there visiting, and just with your person. There's something so beautiful about knowing that you get a chance to say goodbye to somebody, because a lot of people don't get that chance. And I think it's something to totally take advantage of if you do have that opportunity, is to say what you need to say and get everything off your chest, because once they're gone, that opportunity passes. So that would be what I would like to say. I also want to go back to touch on something that you said about learning about love and family and friends. Our dad had some really incredible friends. He had 4 or 5 best friends. If you ask people, people would be like, yeah, he was my best friend. It has been 9 years at the time that we're recording this that our dad has passed away, and we still get a group text from 3 or 4 of his friends every single birthday and every single anniversary of his passing. And that is so cool that his best friends still think about us 3 kids every time and share some memories with us every year. And I think there's something so special about that. What are you grateful for from those days?
I think for me, it's definitely the closeness that it brought our family, because I know with death, it can divide a family and tear them apart, but it truly brought us all so close. And even to our uncles who we grew up next to, and of course we've moved away from as we've gotten older and as our lives have changed. But really, the closeness that it brought our family, I am forever grateful for, because as you had mentioned, Dad wasn't a really big social butterfly, and we didn't spend a lot of holidays with our relatives. And so this was just a really great opportunity to build that relationship with each and every one of them. And I'm so thankful and grateful for that, because I feel like even to this day, I know it's been so long since Dad passed, but we still have that close relationship with our uncles. And gosh, do they remind us of Dad so much. It's so incredible to just have that piece of Dad in them. And I love that so much.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And even our brother too. So he's 8 years older than me and 10 years older than Danette. But just hearing him as he's getting older, hearing him speak sometimes, especially on the phone, I'm like, oh my gosh, you sound just like Dad. And so it's really cool to have that connection with our uncles and our brother and still hear Dad sometimes, their mannerisms and the way they speak. And I just want to say I'm grateful for the quiet moments too, just sitting there holding hands, telling the stories, and the way we were all just together. And time just stood still a little bit, I think, before the hustle and bustle of just life started up again. And oh my gosh, jumping right into funeral planning, which we will do another podcast episode on, because oh my gosh, I was not expecting it to be as crazy as it was. So we'll chat about that another time. But I think just really having that calmness and stillness before life just went on. That's the thing about grief and death and loss, is your person dies, but you still have to feed yourself. You still have to feed your family. You still have to meet your work deadlines. You still have to pay your bills. It's your world stops, but the hustle and bustle doesn't stop. So I'll just always be grateful for those quiet moments.
I will always be grateful for you, sister.
Aw, back at ya.
Awesome. Thank you all so much for letting us share this story. As we all have learned, grief isn't linear, and the week that Dad passed away will stay with us forever, but so will the love that we felt in that room.
If you're walking through hospice or anticipating a goodbye, we see you. Make sure you take the time for yourself too, because you still matter as well. You are not alone. Thanks for hanging out with us today. Truly, it means so much that you're here listening to our chaos and our feelings.
If you want more tools, more support, or just a place where people actually get it, head over to growthroughyourgrief.net.
And if this episode helped, send it to someone who might need a little love, or someone who thinks they're the only one crying in the shower.
See you next time.